The train to Eldritch was always empty. It was a fact that everyone in the nearby towns knew but never discussed. The train ran every night at exactly 11:59 p.m., its rusted cars creaking and groaning as it pulled into the station. No one ever boarded, and no one ever got off. But tonight, against his better judgment, Daniel was going to be on it. Daniel had always been fascinated by the train. As a child, he would sit by his bedroom window and watch it pass, its single headlight cutting through the fog like a dying star. His parents had warned him never to go near it, but they never explained why. It was just one of those things you didn't talk about, like the old graveyard on the hill or the abandoned asylum at the edge of town. But Daniel wasn't a child anymore. He was a man with a camera and a hunger for the unknown. He had spent years researching the train, piecing together fragments of stories and rumors. Some said it was a ghost train, carrying the souls of the damned to a place worse than hell. Others claimed it was a government experiment, a relic of some long-forgotten project. But no one knew for sure, and that was what drew Daniel to it. The station was deserted when he arrived, the platform slick with rain. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rusted metal, and the only sound was the distant rumble of thunder. Daniel checked his watch, 11:58 p.m. The train would be here any minute. He adjusted the strap of his camera and took a deep breath. This was it. He was going to uncover the truth about the last train to Eldritch. The train arrived right on time, its brakes screeching as it came to a halt. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit interior. The seats were empty, the windows fogged with condensation. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The doors closed behind him, and the train began to move. The interior was eerily quiet, the only sound the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks. Daniel took a seat near the back, his camera resting on his lap. He glanced out the window, but the world outside was a blur of darkness and rain. As the train picked up speed, Daniel began to feel uneasy. The air grew colder, and the lights flickered ominously. He tightened his grip on the camera, his heart pounding in his chest. Something was wrong. The first sign was the whispering. It started softly, almost imperceptibly, but grew louder with each passing second. Daniel couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a chorus of fear, of despair. He turned his head, trying to locate the source, but the whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then he saw them, shadows, moving in the corners of his vision. They flitted across the seats, their forms indistinct but undeniably human. Daniel raised his camera, snapping a photo, but when he looked at the screen, there was nothing there. The train lurched suddenly, throwing Daniel to the floor. The lights went out, plunging the car into darkness. He scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices screaming in his ears. And then he saw it, a figure, standing at the far end of the car. It was tall and thin, its features obscured by the darkness. But Daniel could feel its eyes on him, cold and unblinking. The figure began to move toward him, its steps slow and deliberate. Daniel backed away, his back hitting the door. He fumbled with the handle, but it was locked. The figure was closer now, its presence suffocating. Daniel raised his camera, snapping photo after photo, but the figure didn't stop. It reached out, its hand cold and bony, and grabbed his wrist. The last thing Daniel saw before the darkness took him was the figure's face, its hollow eyes staring into his soul. The train to Eldritch arrived at its destination right on time, its doors sliding open to reveal an empty platform. The station was deserted, the air thick with the smell of decay. And if you were to look inside the train, you might see Daniel's camera, lying on the floor, its screen cracked and dark. But Daniel himself was gone, swallowed by the darkness, just like all the others who had dared to board the last train to Eldritch. And the whispers continued, growing louder with each passing night, as the train prepared for its next journey. The first time Lena heard the whispers, she thought it was just the wind. Her family had just moved into an old countryside house, far from the noise of the city. It was peaceful, surrounded by endless fields and towering oak trees. But something about the backyard felt off. At the very edge of the property, hidden beneath tangled weeds and dry leaves, was a small, forgotten grave. The tombstone was cracked, the name faded beyond recognition. And at night, when the world fell silent, it whispered. Lena was lying in bed the first time she heard it. A soft, pleading voice. "Help me." She sat up, heart pounding. The sound drifted from outside, carrying through the open window. Slowly, she crept to the glass and peered into the darkness. The backyard was still. The grave sat untouched beneath the moonlight. And then, the whisper came again. "You have to find me." Lena's stomach twisted. She wanted to believe it was just her imagination. But the next morning, when she stepped into the backyard, a single word had appeared on the tombstone: dig. She told herself not to do it. She told herself to ignore the whispers, to pretend nothing was wrong. But that night, the voice grew desperate. "Please, Lena, I need you." Something inside her snapped. Armed with a shovel, she stepped into the cold night and began to dig. The earth was dry, resisting her every movement. But she kept going, her breath heavy in the silent air. Then, the shovel hit something hard. Her blood ran cold. With trembling hands, she brushed away the dirt. Beneath the soil was an old wooden box, rotted and barely holding together. And inside it, a small skeleton, curled into a fetal position. Lena gasped, stumbling back. Her mind screamed for her to run, but her body refused to move. Then, from behind her, came a soft giggle. Slowly, she turned. Standing at the edge of the grave was a girl, no older than 7. Her dress was tattered, her skin pale as the moonlight. And her eyes, black and endless, locked onto Lena's. "You found me," the girl whispered. Lena's breath hitched. Who are you?" The girl smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I'm you." Lena's heart stopped. She tried to step back, but the ground beneath her collapsed. She fell, plunging into the open grave. When Lena woke, the sun was rising, golden light spilling over the yard. The grave was gone. The tombstone vanished. Had it all been a dream? Dazed, she staggered into the house. But something was wrong. Her parents didn't react when she called their names. She stepped in front of her mother. "Mom." Her mother didn't blink. Didn't see her. A chilling realization crept over Lena as she turned to the mirror. There was nothing there. No reflection. No her. And outside, where the grave once stood, a new tombstone had appeared. The name was clear now. Lena Carter, 2017-2024. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Somewhere in the wind, a whisper echoed. "I told you to find me."